Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter,
business editor Greg Jefferson.
And this is the first week of February 2020. We're a few hours away from knowing the results of the Iowa caucuses. I think as you listen to this, you will know more than we know as we're talking to you. But here in Texas, we're a couple of weeks away from early voting starting. And I wanted to, before we got going with the show, I wanted to make sure that you all knew that the Express News has its interactive voter guide online. And I think it's really helpful to people who are trying to figure out what's going on and make sense of our election, our primary election. And if you just go to expressnews.com/politics, you can find all the information you need about candidates. You'll have endorsements and that sort of thing. So one of the races that we're looking at in this area is the Republican race for Bexar County chair. And if you've been reading the Express News the last couple of years, you've probably read a lot of stories about the current chair, Cynthia Brim, and a lot of controversy surrounding her time in office. And she has three challengers in this race, John Austin, Jacinto Martinez, and our guest today, Charlotte Williamson Eisenhower. And now Charlotte ran for state representative a couple of years ago, the seat that Joe Straus vacated, and that Steve Allison ended up winning, and decided last fall to run for this seat. So Charlotte, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you on.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of things we want to get into, but I guess we might want to start with something that's been in the local news quite a bit over the past week. And this concerns a December 16th incident involving Cynthia Brim, the current chair, who you're challenging. Basically what happened was there was a management committee meeting for the Bexar County Republican Party. A party activist, Monica Rojas Stone, went to the meeting, talked to Cynthia Brim afterwards, wanted to get a copy of a precinct chair application that she had submitted, and Cynthia Brim said she didn't have it. It led to an altercation with both accusing the other of sort of attacking, initiating an attack. Cynthia Brim called the police on Monica Rojas Stone, but then when the police arrived, according to the police report, Cynthia Brim was irrational, I think was a word that was used, and disruptive. Erratic, that's right. And was mad that the police officer was wanting to get both sides of the story, wanting to speak to Monica Rojas Stone first. And so she refused to speak to him, called his supervisor, and that it was a situation that's probably familiar to people who've been following the conflicts that Cynthia Brim also has had with Jackie Callanan, the Bexar County Elections Administrator, and over the past year. So, Charlotte, I wanted to before we get into some of the other issues, I wanted to get a chance to get your perspective on that incident. I'm guessing you weren't there. Obviously, I wasn't there. But what do you make of this incident?
No, you're right. I was not there, and I found out about it, I think, a few minutes before it hit the local news. I think I might have I've heard about it through either someone saying, turn on the news, or I might have woken up in the morning and said, to a barrage of text messages, which is quite the normal these days. No, I wasn't there. I'm sort of embarrassed that we're having to talk about this kind of thing, that this is the state of the Republican Party as it is. And so this is the reason I decided to run. This is obviously not the most convenient time for me to be doing this. So
yeah, you just became a first-time mom.
I'm a new mom, so yeah, that's a little bit
3
for
months
the
ago.
confusion. Yeah, just days and nights kind of run into each other a little bit, but it's getting better. I have a little, and I apologize to your listeners. I have a little bit of a cold. I don't have normally this raspy a voice, but no, it's embarrassing, and it's embarrassing that I think we looked up out of the 34 articles, give or take, that have been written about the Republican Party since she took office in the Express News. They're all about Cynthia, and it's maddening. I mean, if if this is the impression that people get of the Republican Party in Bexar County, we're doomed. I mean, this is just, and the conduct that happens. I mean, you're not at all the CEC meetings, and neither am I. I don't dare. But I mean, it's just the decorum has just devolved into just. I'm wondering if I'm running for chairman or den mother or high school, not principal, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's terrible.
It's awfully hard to. I mean, once an organization kind of gets damaged and its culture kind of debased, it's really hard to reform it and bring it back. Like, what are your plans for? Well, first of all, let's start off by what's the effect of Cynthia Brim on the party over the last couple of years, and then how do you fix it going forward?
Well, I'd even like to say, to back it up, I mean, to give Cynthia a little bit of. Cynthia is the result of this. This didn't just start with Cynthia. Mm-hmm. This has been going on a long time. There's been a division in the party that I didn't even know really. I was aware of it before I ran for office, but then when I ran for office, really sort of saw the level of just animosity that there was. I mean, it started just the push-pull of, I guess you have, in simple terms, the establishment, and then I think in 2012, it really, when you had the Tea Party, the farther right come in, and that push-pull and the establishment of the party being sort of centered in kind of the Alamo Heights area, and sort of the old guard being really challenged, and rightly so, by the expanding conservatives on the north side and more to the west as people kept moving farther and farther out, and the establishment ignoring what was effectively 2/3 of the Republican Party in Bexar County. And you saw that a lot with the race between, I mean, it was sort of epitomized by the race in House District 121. And to a certain degree, the Senate race in District 25 with the Donna Campbell race. When Donna Campbell came in there, if you'll remember,
Right.
That was, I mean, she
wasn't the establishment choice.
She was not the
Right.
establishment choice. And it's funny, now she's very welcomed. But I remember when that happened, people just turning up their nose and having not pleasant things to say. So it's been happening for a while, and so Cynthia, despite her, and then when the news broke about all of her terrible personal problems that we won't go into, a lot of people felt betrayed by this. So I mean, this isn't just Cynthia. This is before that. Chairman DeRazio, Robert Stovall, and it goes back. And I really had no idea that this was even. It was a learning experience running for 121. Let me tell you. I mean, I couldn't say this. I talking to people on the north side of town. You couldn't of the district. You couldn't. You had to watch what you say both places. Like, oh, I was talking to Joe Straus the other day. You don't say that to people on the north side, and I mean, and you don't say, oh, I was talking to Matt Beebe the other day to people on the in Alamo Heights.
Well,
I mean, it's just
as a lot of people will remember, in 2017, the precinct chairs basically voted to censure Joe Straus. The Bexar County Republican Party did that, and my memory is when you ran, because I think your primary campaign for state representative, which was Joe Straus's seat, happened just around that time, maybe just
right
after that. And I remember you saying, you were describing yourself as a Joe Straus Republican, if I remember right, and which, Joe Straus is someone who I think has been admired by a lot of Republican voters in his district because he kept getting reelected, and a lot of Democrats respected him as someone they could work with, who was willing to to try to compromise to get legislation passed. But obviously, being a Joe Straus Republican, as you pointed out, I mean, it's it's gotten complicated in local Republican politics. Did you? So you found that when you were running, I'm sure.
Right. Well, it's funny you say a Joe Straus Republican, and I remember I must have said that at the time. That was sort of before. I mean, it makes me cringe now a little bit because I'm like, oh wait, because as I evolved as I ran, and I would say I was more of a Joe Straus Republican voter.
Right.
And
that might have been what you said.
No,
maybe I'm remembering wrong.
no, you're right. You're right. I was full of praise, and it was because of Joe Straus and my admiration for him that I got in the race. But as I got into the race, I must have realized, people say that you evolve when you run for office. I don't know if any of you guys have ever run for office. It's an interesting experience. I've worked on several political campaigns, but once you're the guy or whatever, I mean, you really have to sit down and think, well, what do I believe? And I had gotten more conservative than I used to be on certain issues. So I wouldn't call myself, it's funny, I wouldn't call myself a Joe Straus Republican today, but then again, that's a different time. I mean, Joe's out of politics and has gotten into private life and has his thing. But yeah, I would say I was a Joe Straus Republican. But as I campaigned and learned more about the party, I got more conservative. But now running for chairman, I've told the moderates and I've told people on the far right who I have a lot of support from. Listen, I'm the job of chairman. There's two basic jobs or duties, if you will. It's to expand the party and to be neutral and to support whoever it is that comes out of the primary to get them elected in November. And people have tried to pin me down, like, are you a Straus, a Joe Straus Republican? Are you moderate? Are you a far right? And I said, listen, I'm nothing. Yeah, I'm a Republican. I'm a good Republican. I can talk about certain issues that I'm quite to the right on, and then some things I'm a little bit more center on. But so.
Well, my sense is that you've wanted to be a unifying figure in the party, somebody that everybody could kind of within the party could
agree to disagree on,
or accept as a leader in the party. And I sense this, and I sense this with the local Democratic Party too, that there are people who don't want to be united, that they just feel like I want my faction to win over that other faction. And they maybe almost resent the idea of unity within the party. And so I'm guessing as a candidate, that's a challenge. And then as a chair woman, that would be a challenge. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, it's funny. When I first started giving speeches when I was about 9 months pregnant, it was interesting. I was unity, and a certain activist who I will not name texted me and said, I heard that you led with that unity crap speech. Could you take? And I mean, and that was, and I was, and I mean, by far and away, when people would criticize my speeches, they said, "Could you just leave out the unity?" I mean, and I'm like, what is that?
When did that become controversial?
Yeah, I know, right? So I went back. And I'm like, well, what do I mean by unity? And how I mean, there were certain times where I was just like, maybe this just isn't possible to do. And one of the other things was I told everybody I say in my speeches, listen, I'm the only person I know that goes to all of the various clubs across Bexar County. Mostly it's women's clubs, and they range from the far right to the more moderate. And the thing that they held against me the most was, I thought you just went to our club. What do you mean? Like, you go to all of them? And so they were a little hurt that, I mean, I was getting along with everybody when they thought I was only speaking to them.
So you were seeing other clubs behind
Yeah, I was
back?
seeing, yeah,
Was that
yeah,
it? Was
that's
that
what
it?
it was. I mean,
Oh,
well,
wow.
it's kind of funny. We laugh, but it's sort of true to that extent. And people sort of take me. I'm like, well, you can still like me even though I like that person. And
well, yeah, as you know, on the Democratic side, I mean, there's it's people often get defined. Are you a Manuelista, a supporter of the former chair Manuel Medina, or do you support Monica?
Well,
and so it's that kind of thing, and it's like people get defined. And I've heard some people say, well, they call me a Manuelista, but I'm really not. not, and it's and it's very.
This is how you know you're involved in local politics.
That's right. That's right.
Like, are you a Straussian? Are you not? But
Right.
So it must be a little discomforting to hear our friend Gilbert here compare Democrats to the Democratic Party in Bexar County to the Republican Party, because the Democratic Party has been famously dysfunctional, maybe getting better, but for years that's been kind of the joke. And now, it's very similar. Yeah, it seems
now the
very
shoes on the other foot.
Yeah. I mean, so kind of going back to like how you reform that. Like, what do you do? I mean, say you were to win re-election. I mean, how do you make the Republican? Yeah. How do you make the party functional again?
Well, and I like to say, in a way, the Cynthia Brim, it's on the silver lining is everybody's just throwing up their hands. And as you say, I come from the sort of the Straussian, or more I come from that part of town. All my supporters are on the far right. I mean, or my endorsements that I've been able to collect are all the, everyone from the far right. So I've got them on my side. Hopefully I'll go to a runoff. I get the establishment on board too, because they're a little bit reluctant. Because they think I'm too far right. I mean, it's funny, they think I'm too far right. Refresh me again what your question was.
Oh, just how you kind of repair whatever damage has been done to the party going forward. I mean, for example, do you have Republican office holders just kind of, the Democrats, like often they have office holders just going off and doing their own thing, and there's very little interaction with the party. So I'm curious about whether the GOP is seeing the same thing, and how you overcome that if that's the case.
Well, I got to know all the judicial candidates when I ran last time, and then supported them after I was out of the primary. Published a mailer, and really tried to financially support them when the party wouldn't. And I say that because I'm in contact with every single office holder that's on the ballot now. Even Cynthia and I have each other's cell phone number. I mean, if you can believe that. I've reached.
Do you get a lot of texts from her?
Not so much. But,
Okay.
If so, we'd like to see them.
No, I don't. That is one thing. I'm always very good to keep people's privacy and or people's confidence. I've reached out to every elected official, past and present and past. And some of them wouldn't call me back because they think I'm asking. I said, listen, I'm not asking for an endorsement. I'm not even asking for your money. I just want to sit down and talk to you about what we're going to do going forward. Past chairmen, people that were on the ballot 2 years ago that were defeated by the establishment, that were on the far right. That I've been talking to the establishment, like, listen, what are we going to do going forward? This is a circling of the wagons, a gathering of a meeting of the minds. I want everybody to sit down, and I told everybody from the beginning too. The one endorsement, not shocking, that I do have is Kevin Wolf, and that was the one that I, he's like, how do you plan on doing anything like this? And I think the only reason I got his endorsement is because he's not going to be running for re-election. I didn't know he wasn't running for election when we sat and talked at the time, but it's quite convenient. I have to let, Chairman DeRazio actually said, you have to let everybody in this wants to be heard. So sit down, let everybody be heard, and figure out what we're going to do. And I also said, listen, I'm not running here to create winners and losers. I've told even Cynthia, and I haven't told Cynthia herself, but I've told her through her people. I said, listen, if I win, I'm not going to kick you guys. I don't assume the throne or whatever. I don't think
purging people or something.
Yeah, purging people. If you go off into the wilderness, be gone with you. No, not at all. Quite the contrary. I've told her chaplain that does the prayer meetings. Listen, that's going to remain the same, and they're shocked. They're just like, "What do you mean this is?" This is going to be the whole Republican Party, and there's not going to be. My winningness does not is not a victory for any certain wing of the party, and it's also not a loss for any wing of the party, and that just sort of floors people. And I think that's really working. And I've continued to show up since the last primary. I kept going to all the meetings, and I joined all the groups too when I ran last time, just because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I just kept showing. I mean, that's the thing. You just keep showing up. They know your face. The one face I haven't seen in campaigning in the last however many months it's been is Cynthia. She's nowhere.
Her signs are
Sure, her
out.
signs are everywhere, but she is nowhere.
Interesting.
I mean, she's assume she's at headquarters. She says she works 60 hours a week, and she's a hardworking 60. And I remind her, well, that's probably because you can't get any volunteers to come and help you. I mean, which is very important. So, yeah, I've been relentless in my unity, my quest for unity, and maybe if I can beat it into them.
But if this, dysfunction continues, what's sort of the practical effect of that? I mean, are you worried that if this were to continue, if Brim was reelected, that this would hurt y'all going forward in a real way?
Oh, it's every man for themselves. I mean, at this point, I mean, everybody knows that. It's every candidate for themselves. It was that way last time around. I mean, it was just basically no help from the party, no money from the party, raise what you can. I mean, it's just it has been amazing how the Republican candidates have sort of cobbled together and they sort of have joined together in absence of the party structure helping them at all. I mean, but that's the reason I'm doing this with the newborn screaming in my ear, and I've got other family business stuff to attend to. But this is important. Right. I mean, I really do firmly believe in the values of the Republican Party. I grew up with them, and I'm doing this I really think that the Republican Party in Bexar County needs to be saved. And I think if the Republican Party falls in Bexar County, it's a domino effect that happens
around the state.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, obviously the Republican Party still dominates the state, but as you pointed out in 2018, that was a really rough election cycle locally for the Republican Party, and you had Republican judges pretty much being swept out of the courthouse, which I think even some Democrats I've talked to were sad to see some experienced judges who they felt were these were not partisan figures and were just good at what they did, but they got swept out.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I say that the amount of judicial knowledge that was lost on January 1st in 2019 when all of the new judges came in to replace the ones that had been defeated. I think we calculated it's close to 200 years of judicial. I mean, is that right? Or legal experience in judicial? But, we could go back and add that up. That's how I actually got involved with politics in Bexar County. My father was an attorney and was a big supporter of both sides with the judges, and so the judges, the ones you feel like it shouldn't be partisan, but they get sort of caught up in the wave, and that's the biggest tragedy of all this, because when you're down ballot like that, the waves affect you, and there's very little you can do about it.
And for those who are not so familiar with you, who are listening in, could you talk a little bit about your background? I know you went to St. Mary's Law School, and you worked for your family's oil and gas business.
Now, we are original. I've been in Bexar County for 25 years. I was born in Midland, Texas, actually, West Texas. And so lifetime in the oil and gas business. And my father actually moved here in the early 90s when the price of oil was just, you couldn't even afford to operate. And he went to law school and graduated at 50. Went to law school on a credit card, he liked to famously say. And stayed here, had plans to just go back to Midland. It was sort of going to be a hobby degree, and a degree he'd always wanted to have. But he stayed here and really called San Antonio home, loved fell in love with San Antonio, the people in San Antonio, and I did too. I went to St. Mary's. I did my undergraduate at University of Texas Austin in the early 2000s, and then DC, had a little bit of a political stint DC, and then came back here and started law school. And then my father passed away when I was in law school, and so we had to sort of a change in plans, sort of had to, figure out his, oil interest, and, sort of my sisters and I figured that out and sold the drilling operation and the saltwater disposal operation, and then kept the mineral, stuff. So then now we're splitting up into our own and all three of us going our own way. So that's a lot of work to do right now as well. But I really do feel that the time it's now or never for the Republican Party. I mean, if we don't pull this together now, the Democrats are figuring out what's going on, and they're organized, and they've got the wind at their backs.
One of the things that you mentioned to me a few months ago when we were talking was, and this is kind of maybe a broader look at the Republican Party in general, I think beyond Bexar County, but you mentioned, trying to expand the party base, and you said that concerns about the Republican Party being perceived as just the party of older white men. And if you could talk a little bit about that and how and what the party is. Obviously within Bexar County, you only have so much control over the direction of the party, but what would you like to see happen so that the Republican Party going forward would be seen as appealing to a wider group of people?
Oh, wider. I thought you said whiter. I was like,
Yeah. I'm really glad. I'm really glad you clarified that because one of my campaign promises has been, or campaign ideas, has been establishing satellite offices. That's been, as I've been talking to people, that is the one common theme, especially when I go over to the South Side. The Republican office is on the North Side, and that's it. And I mean, and Bexar County is huge, and it's so, if you don't have a car, it's so hard to access. I mean, the limited access. Although the VIA system is, I'm not knocking that. So my goal is to establish satellite offices on the South Side, East Side, West Side, and actually make the North Side office a satellite office as well, and have a central office, downtown or. And the way I've been doing that is, or plan to do that, is just the same way the Democrats actually I found out have done. You can have donated space, or space at a severely discounted rate. I've been talking to commercial property leasers and owners, and I think what I've been saying is the Republican Party needs to go to the voters, not the other way around. And it's catching on like wildfire. I go to the South Side. I mean, they're just, people don't realize there are Republicans on the South Side. They're small business owners. They're homeowners. And what's happening on the South Side is a lot of what's happened on the North Side. People are starting to get taxed out of their homes. And as the appraisal values start, creeping up, and the Republican ideas of lower taxes, it has an audience. I have an audience on the other parts of town where you wouldn't think that were traditional Republican areas. And we're establishing more women's clubs too. I was at the inaugural meeting for the Heart of San Antonio Republican Women, and it was handing out my signs, and it was wonderful. They said, "Oh, how much do we owe you for these signs?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, usually we have to pay for political signs." And I said, "No, they're free, and here, have a T-shirt." And well, then they said, "Well, we have to run. We have to catch the bus." And it was wonderful to see that. And there's a lot of enthusiasm that I think just needs to be tapped, and that seeing a Republican office in those parts of town is symbolism and symbolic, and it's something that people are really responding to. They don't have to be nice offices.
and that's it's exciting.
We began by mentioning the Iowa caucuses, which are and that's will be
What a
the kind of the
great day.
beginning of the process for the Democrats choosing their
I'm so
presidential
excited that
nominee.
we're doing this today. That's so neat. This is like the
yeah.
beginning of the primary.
Well, what I was curious about is, as somebody who wants to see the Republican Party do well in November, do you look at it just as an observer and think, well, if this nominee, if Bernie Sanders gets it, this will help our chance, or if Elizabeth
for
Warren,
sure.
Joe Biden. I mean, do you look at these different options and sort of
Think what-
calculate how that would affect candidates in Bexar County on the Republican side?
Well, yeah. Now that you mention it, that's yes. I think that Bernie Sanders is going to be I think Elizabeth. Just political prediction. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think Elizabeth Warren's in a lot of trouble. Just seeing that I always watch the Iowa caucus from New Hampshire because I was working in New Hampshire at that time. I've never worked Iowa, but on the national campaigns I've been on, we were in New Hampshire just eagerly awaiting to see what we had to deal with a week later. It is interesting. I think I got to tell you, I'm more worried about Bernie than I am about Joe, because in a way, the juxtaposition of ideas, and there's a lot of people that are Bernie fans that came to Trump that didn't, so because of the outsider status.
People don't necessarily realize that, but it's true.
It is true. They just want the shock to the system, something different, and Joe Biden represents just sort of the same. I mean, it's just sort of awakened from. I don't want to say awakened from the grave. That's not right. But I mean, just the old, like, all right, here. How long has he been running for president? When was the first time? 30 years ago.
32 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. So, I'd rather it be Joe Biden, but
So you're actually more worried because I mean, they're none of us really know, but the one school of thought is Bernie Sanders would be seen by voters as so far to the left that it would be political suicide for Democrats. But I mean, there's also that thought, and I think what you're talking about is the idea that there are people who are anti-establishment. Mm-hmm. Who would be on the fence between Trump and Bernie Sanders.
Right. Well, I mean, there's two ways to play it. You can say, well, there's not play it, but I do like the juxtaposition between the left, the far left. I mean, it's the far left, and like, do you really want? Bernie is socialist. Mm-hmm. I mean, so and I can frame an argument against that probably more easily than I can against Joe Biden, but Bernie excites people, whereas Joe Biden doesn't.
That's true.
People would stay home with Joe and wouldn't with Bernie. So I can more easily frame the narrative if it was Bernie, but then again, Trump. It's just people are excited about Trump. People are excited about Bernie. There's excitement at both levels. Sort of like like Obama versus Hillary. Biden and Hillary are sort of the same vein, and someone that stays home is a vote for you in a different direction. In half a way.
Right.
So.
Well, I guess in about a month or so, you're going to know where things are going to go for you.
Right.
And anything else you'd like to leave for the Republican voters of Bexar County, as they got four choices, I guess.
Four choices. I hope to, obviously, I'd like to ask for their vote and their support. I obviously I think I'm the best choice, and respectfully ask for their vote. And I think it is. I think we're going to end up going to the runoff, and and we've got the resources to go the distance, and I really think there's hope for the Republican Party. My husband said, "Do a Trump. I alone can fix it." No, the Republican Party is in some trouble, and I alone can fix it. But I do think that I am the only person that I know in this particular situation that has done sort of my homework and the groundwork in this, and I do feel I'm not promising a victory, but I think I'm the best shot for it, honestly.
Well, Charlotte Williamson-Eisenhower, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us, and good
Appreciate
luck
it,
in the
guys.
campaign.
Thank you.
Take care. And for those of you listening, we'll catch up with you next week. Thanks.